I was running late that day, which was rare for me, but life has a funny way of making small inconveniences feel like warning signs you don't notice until it's too late. It started with my car refusing to start, a dead battery that I had to jump before making the mad dash to work. Then came the busted coffee machine in the office, forcing me to drink the stale, burnt liquid they had in the break room. By lunchtime, my boss had already chewed me out over something that wasn't even my fault, and all I wanted was to get home, sit on my couch, and let the weight of the day dissolve. But the moment I stepped through my front door, I knew something was off. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it. The house was quiet, too quiet. Normally, Sarah would have music playing in the background, one of those lo-fi playlists she liked to unwind to after work, or at the very least, the faint hum of the TV. But there was nothing. Just silence. My first thought was that she wasn't home yet, maybe stuck at work or out running errands. But then I noticed it. Her shoes were by the door, the ones she only wore inside. Sarah never left the house without changing into her sneakers or sandals, and those were nowhere to be seen. I moved further into the house, trying to shake the growing unease twisting in my gut. The living room looked normal, the kitchen was untouched, but when I stepped into the hallway leading to our bedroom, I stopped dead in my tracks. There was a jacket draped over the back of one of the dining chairs, one that didn't belong to me. A man's jacket. Dark, expensive-looking, definitely not something Sarah would have just left lying around. My heartbeat started pounding in my ears as I stared at it, my mind scrambling for an explanation, but none of them made sense. I took a step forward, slow, cautious, like I was afraid of what I'd find. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and as I reached for the handle, I heard something, a muffled voice, low but distinct. It wasn't Sarah's. My hand clenched into a fist before I even realized it. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to kick the door open, to demand answers, but some part of me hesitated, that tiny, pathetic hope that maybe I was wrong, that maybe I was misinterpreting what was happening. So instead of making a scene, I did something I never thought I'd do. I crouched down and peeked through the crack in the door. And that's when my world split in two. Sarah was sitting on the edge of our bed, her head bowed, her fingers twisting the sheets nervously. Across from her, standing near the dresser, was a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a fitted dress shirt that looked like it had been hastily tucked back into his pants. But it wasn't just his presence that made my blood run cold. It was the way Sarah looked at him. Not with fear, not with discomfort, but with something else. Something that made my stomach churn. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, her voice shaky, like she was holding back tears. "I feel so guilty." The man sighed, running a hand through his hair, and took a step closer to her. "You don't have to feel guilty, Sarah. You're not happy. You said it yourself." I gripped the doorframe so tightly my knuckles ached. My mind was racing, my chest felt tight, and for a moment, I thought I might be sick. I wanted to barge in, to demand an explanation, to scream, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Sarah shook her head, her hands gripping the sheets tighter. "I love him. I do. But she stopped, inhaling sharply, and that hesitation was enough to shatter whatever was left of my self-control. I pushed the door open. The way her head snapped up, the way her eyes widened in horror, it confirmed everything I needed to know before a single word left her lips. Sarah shot up from the bed like she had been struck by lightning, her face draining of color so fast I thought she might pass out. The man, whoever the hell he was, didn't move at first, his body tense, like he was waiting to see what I would do. My mind was a mess, thoughts slamming into each other so violently that I couldn't focus on any one thing. I wanted to hit him, throw him out of my house, scream at Sarah, demand answers, but for a few long seconds, all I could do was stand there, breathing hard, my fist clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. My voice, when I finally found it, was quiet but sharp enough to cut through the thick, suffocating silence in the room. "Who the hell is this?" Sarah's mouth opened and closed like she had forgotten how to speak, her hands shaking as she tried to step toward me, but I held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. I didn't want her near me. I didn't want to smell her perfume, didn't want to see the way her eyes were darting back and forth like she was scrambling to come up with a way to spin this into something less than what it was. The man finally moved then, running a hand through his hair again, looking more annoyed than guilty, and that nearly sent me over the edge. "I think I should go," he muttered, grabbing his jacket from where it was draped over the chair. "You're not going anywhere," I snapped, my eyes locked onto him now, the heat of my anger finally giving me something to hold on to. "You're going to stand there and tell me who the hell you are and why you're in my bedroom with my wife." Sarah finally found her voice, stepping between us, her hands raised slightly, like she thought I was about to lunge at him. "Steve, please, just don't." I cut her off, my jaw so tight it hurt. "Say his name. Tell me who he is." Her lips parted, but nothing came out, and I turned my attention back to him, taking a step closer. "You have 3 seconds to start talking before I make you." The man sighed, shaking his head slightly, but at least he had the sense to look a little less smug when he answered. "My name's Eric. I work with Sarah." I let that sink in, every piece of the last few months snapping into place with sickening clarity. The late nights, the sudden extra hours, the way she always had her phone glued to her hand when she got home, the way she had started pulling away from me little by little. I had convinced myself it was just work stress, but the truth had been right in front of me the entire time. How long? The words felt like they were being ripped out of me, the weight of them making my chest feel like it was caving in. Sarah shook her head quickly, her eyes glassy with tears that I didn't give a damn about. "It's not what you think." I let out a humorless laugh, gesturing toward the bed, the sheets that were wrinkled from where she had been sitting with him. "Not what I think." "What exactly do you think this looks like, Sarah?" She sucked in a breath, blinking rapidly like she was trying to stop herself from crying, but I wasn't in the mood for whatever pathetic performance she was about to put on. I turned my attention back to Eric. "How long?" I asked again, my voice sharp enough to make him hesitate. 6 months, he admitted, not even looking ashamed, and that was what finally pushed me past the point of no return. I swung before I even realized I was doing it, my fist connecting with his jaw so hard that the sound of it cracked through the air. He stumbled back, cursing, and Sarah screamed, rushing toward him, which only made me angrier. She should have been worried about me, should have been trying to explain herself, should have been doing anything other than putting her hands on him like he was the one who needed comforting. "Get out," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Both of you." Sarah's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide. "Steve, please." "Get out," I repeated, my hands shaking with the effort it took to keep myself from hitting him again. "I don't want to hear whatever bullshit excuse you're about to come up with. I don't want to see your face. Get the hell out of my house." Eric, to his credit, didn't argue. He straightened up, rubbing his jaw, and gave Sarah a look that made my stomach turn. She didn't even hesitate before following him out, not once looking back at me. I stood there, listening to the sound of the front door opening and closing, my hands still clenched at my sides, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to break free from my ribs. I should have felt relief that they were gone, but all I felt was the weight of everything that had just shattered around me. The life I had built, the trust one had given her, the years I had spent believing in something that had been crumbling right under my nose. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing, my mind still trying to catch up with what had just happened. 6 months. For 6 months, she had been lying to me, sleeping next to me every night, kissing me goodbye in the morning, coming home, and pretending like everything was fine while she was sneaking around behind my back with some asshole from her office. The realization made my stomach turn, while rising in my throat, and I barely made it to the bathroom before I was throwing up, my entire body shaking. I sat on the floor afterward, my back against the cold tile, my breath coming in short, uneven gasps. I needed to do something, needed to get out of that house before it suffocated me, but for the first time in my life, I had no idea what the hell I was supposed to do next. I don't know how long I sat on that bathroom floor, staring at the wall, feeling like my body wasn't even mine anymore. It was like something had cracked inside me, something so deep that no amount of breathing, no amount of thinking, could fix it. My hands were still shaking, the taste of bile lingering in my mouth, but my mind had gone numb. The house was too quiet now, the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, the kind that made my skin crawl. The bedroom, the bed, the sheet she had sat on while whispering to him like I wasn't even real, it all felt suffocating, and I couldn't be in there for another second. I pushed myself off the floor, gripping the edge of the sink to steady myself, and when I looked up into the mirror, I barely recognized the man staring back at me. My face was pale, my eyes bloodshot, my expression hollow, like someone had reached inside my chest and taken everything that made me who I was. I splashed cold water on my face, but it did nothing to shake the weight pressing down on me. My mind was already racing through everything I had just heard, every moment that had been a lie, every excuse she had given me over the past 6 months that now made perfect, gut-wrenching sense. I walked back into the bedroom, the smell of her perfume still hanging in the air, and it made me sick all over again. Her dresser was covered in things that had once been ours, pictures, trinkets, memories that now meant absolutely nothing. My eyes landed on her jewelry box, the one I had given her for our anniversary 3 years ago, the one she had gushed over like it was the most thoughtful thing in the world. I reached for it before I even realized what I was doing, my fingers gripping the edge as I yanked it off the dresser and sent it crashing to the floor, rings and necklaces spilling across the hardwood like pieces of a life that had never really existed. I needed to get out. I grabbed my keys from the nightstand, shoving them into my pocket as I made my way through the house, my mind blank, my body moving on autopilot. The living room was exactly how I had left it when I came home, everything perfectly in place, a cruel contrast to the chaos ripping through my chest. I stepped outside, the cold air hitting me like a slap, but it still wasn't enough to clear my head. My car was parked where it always was, right in front of the house that no longer felt like home, and I climbed in, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't even know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. I drove without thinking, the streets blurring past me, the familiar turns and intersections nothing more than a background I didn't care about. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it, knowing exactly who it was. Sarah. The same woman who had walked out of our house without even trying to fight for us. The same woman who had spent 6 months lying to my face while crawling into bed with someone else. I didn't want to hear her voice, didn't want to listen to whatever excuse or half-truth she was about to throw at me. I didn't stop driving until I found myself in front of the only place that made sense, the bar down on 5th, the one I used to go to with my friends before life had settled into routines and responsibilities. It wasn't fancy, wasn't anything special, but it was open, and that was enough. I pulled into the parking lot, turned off the car, and just sat there for a moment, trying to will away the rage that was still simmering under my skin. It didn't work. Inside, the bar was mostly empty, a few scattered regulars nursing their drinks, a low hum of conversation filling the space. I walked straight to the counter, not bothering to look around, and the bartender, a guy who had been working here for years, gave me a nod of recognition. "Rough night?" he asked, already reaching for a glass. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "You have no idea." He poured me a whiskey without asking, sliding it across the counter, and I took it, swallowing half of it in one go, the burn doing nothing to dull the ache in my chest. I should have felt something, relief, anger, maybe even sadness, but all I felt was empty. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the ice melting in my glass, my mind replaying the moment I had pushed that door open over and over again. The look on her face, the way she had hesitated before saying his name, the way she had followed him out without a fight. Every part of it felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, a cruel joke that I had been stupid enough to fall for. The sound of someone dropping onto the stool next to me barely registered, but when I turned my head, I found myself staring at Mark, one of my oldest friends, his expression tight with concern. "Sarah called me," he said, his voice cautious, like he wasn't sure how I was going to react. I let out a slow breath, setting my glass down. Of course she did. He studied me for a moment before shaking his head. "What the hell happened?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it, just exhaustion. "She's been screwing some guy from her office for the past 6 months. I walked in on them tonight." Mark's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. "Jesus Christ." "Yeah," I muttered, rubbing a hand over my face. "That about sums it up." He signaled for a drink, leaning back in his seat, his eyes still fixed on me. "What are you going to do?" That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? I had spent the past hour trying to figure that out, trying to make sense of a situation that made no sense at all. But the truth was, there was only one option. "I'm done," I said, the words tasting final. She made her choice. Mark nodded slowly, lifting his glass in silent agreement, and we sat there, two old friends in a bar, drinking to the end of something that should have never ended this way. I woke up with a dull pounding in my head and the kind of dryness in my mouth that made it clear I had gone one drink too far. The room was dark, the faint glow of the streetlights leaking in through the blinds, and for a second, I wasn't sure where I was. The smell of old whiskey and cheap cologne clung to my shirt, and when I shifted, the stiffness in my back told me I hadn't made it to a bed. I turned my head slightly, blinking as my eyes adjusted, and then it hit me, I was on Mark's couch. The events of the night before came rushing back, slamming into me like a truck. The bar, the drinks, the way Mark had practically forced me into his car when I had started mumbling about driving home, the pitiful excuse of a conversation where I had tried to explain something that didn't even make sense to me. I pushed myself up slowly, running a hand over my face, trying to shake off the fog that came with too much alcohol and not enough sleep. The house was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My phone was on the coffee table, the screen cracked from where I must have dropped it at some point. I picked it up, hesitating before pressing the button to wake it up. A dozen missed calls from Sarah, more text messages than I had the energy to scroll through, each one a pathetic attempt to justify the unjustifiable. "Steve, please talk to me. I know you're angry, but we need to discuss this. I'm sorry. Please just answer." I didn't reply. I didn't even bother reading the rest. I tossed the phone back onto the table, the sight of her name making my stomach churn. The reality of what she had done was starting to settle into something more solid, something that wasn't just blind rage or shock but the cold, unchangeable truth. She had betrayed me, over and over again, for half a year. Every moment she had smiled at me, kissed me, laid in our bed beside me, it had all been a performance. The sound of footsteps made me turn my head, and a moment later, Mark appeared in the doorway, looking just as rough as I felt. He scratched at the stubble on his chin, eyeing me carefully before speaking. "You're alive," he muttered, stepping into the room. "That's a good sign." I exhaled sharply, leaning forward to rest my elbows on my knees. "Barely." Mark sat down across from me, rubbing his hands together before letting out a sigh. "She called me again this morning." I clenched my jaw, already knowing what was coming. "Let me guess, she wants to explain." "Something like that," he admitted. "She sounded desperate, man. Said she just wants to talk to you, that she's willing to do anything to fix this." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Fix it? There's nothing left to fix." She made sure of that. Mark didn't argue, just nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "So what's the plan?" That was the question I had been avoiding since the second I walked into that bedroom. I had spent the night drinking away the immediate pain, trying to bury the betrayal under layers of whiskey, but none of that changed the fact that I still had a wife, a house, and a life that had been completely blown apart. "I don't know," I admitted, rubbing at my temples. "I need to get my shit from the house. Figure out what to do next." Mark studied me for a moment before nodding again. "You want me to go with you?" "No," I said immediately, my voice firm. "This is something I need to do on my own." He didn't push, just reached for the remote and flipped on the TV, letting the conversation settle into silence. I knew he was trying to give me space, to let me process things in my own way, but all I felt was a restless energy that wouldn't let me sit still. After a few more minutes, I pushed myself up from the couch, stretching out the stiffness in my back. "I should go before she tries to come here," I muttered, grabbing my keys from the table. Mark just nodded, glancing at me one last time. "You know where to find me if you need anything." I left without another word, stepping out into the morning air, the cold biting at my skin. The drive back to the house felt longer than usual, every red light giving me too much time to think. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands were gripping the wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. Sarah's car was there, parked neatly like nothing had changed, like she hadn't walked out of that house with another man the night before. I stepped out, my body tense, and made my way to the front door. I hesitated for only a second before unlocking it and stepping inside. The house smelled the same, looked the same, but it didn't feel like home anymore. The couch where she had curled up with me to watch movies, the kitchen where we had cooked together, the pictures on the wall of vacations and anniversaries, they were all meaningless now. Sarah was in the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch, her hands gripping each other so tightly that her knuckles were white. The moment she saw me, her eyes filled with something that looked like relief, and she stood quickly, her voice breaking the silence. "Steve." "Don't." I cut her off, stepping past her. "I'm not here to talk." She flinched like I had slapped her, but I didn't care. I walked past her, straight to the bedroom, grabbing the bag I had left in the closet. Clothes, toiletries, the essentials, I didn't need much. I didn't plan on staying in this house a second longer than I had to. Sarah followed me, hovering in the doorway, her voice small. "Please, Steve, just listen to me." I didn't stop packing. "I don't want to hear it." "It was a mistake," she pleaded, stepping closer. "I messed up, I know that, but I never stopped loving you." I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "You don't do what you did to someone you love, Sarah." She swallowed hard, tears brimming in her eyes. "I wasn't thinking. I got caught up in something I didn't know how to get out of." I zipped up the bag, finally turning to look at her. "You had 6 months to stop. You had 6 months to tell me the truth. Instead, you let me keep loving someone who didn't exist." Her lip trembled, but I didn't wait for whatever excuse was about to come out of her mouth. I pushed past her, my grip tightening on the bag as I walked out of the bedroom, out of the house, out of the life that had been nothing but a lie. I didn't look back when I walked out the door. I didn't care if she was crying, if she was standing there watching me leave with regret smeared all over her face. Whatever emotions she was feeling didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was that I was done. I tossed my bag into the passenger seat, climbed into my car, and pulled out of the driveway without hesitation. My hands were gripping the wheel so tightly my fingers ached, but I barely noticed. My mind was already working through the next steps, the practical parts of ending a marriage built on lies. I needed a lawyer. I needed to get my name off the lease. I needed to make sure Sarah couldn't find a way to screw me over in the process. The emotions could wait. Right now, I needed action. I drove straight to the only person I trusted to help me through this. My brother, Adam. He was already up when I knocked on his door, his eyes widening slightly when he saw me standing there with a bag slung over my shoulder and an expression that must have made it clear this wasn't just a casual visit. He stepped aside without asking any questions, letting me in, and I dropped my bag by the door before exhaling sharply, trying to shake off the lingering tension in my chest. Adam leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing his arms, waiting for me to speak. "She cheated on me," I said, my voice flat, drained of anything resembling emotion. Adam's expression hardened instantly, his jaw tightening. "When?" "6 months," I muttered, rubbing a hand over my face. "Some asshole from her job. I caught them last night." Adam didn't say anything right away. He just stood there, processing, probably trying to keep himself from reacting the way he really wanted to. He had never liked Sarah, had always warned me that she had a selfish streak, but he had never pushed too hard because he knew I wouldn't have listened. Now, he looked like he wanted to punch a hole in the wall. "You staying here?" he asked finally, his voice calmer than I expected. "For now," I admitted. "Just until I figure out what's next." "You don't have to figure it out alone," Adam said firmly, pushing off the counter. "You need a lawyer. You need to make sure she doesn't try to screw you over when this gets ugly." "I know," I muttered, my head already pounding at the thought of dealing with the legal side of this disaster. "I'll start looking today." Adam nodded, grabbing his phone. "I know a guy. I'll text you his number." I appreciated that he wasn't pushing me to talk about how I felt, that he wasn't asking stupid questions like if I was okay. Of course, I wasn't okay. There was nothing to talk about. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, had been lying to me for half a year. I had spent nights worrying about her late work hours, thinking she was stressed, thinking maybe I needed to do more, while the whole time, she had been with him. There was nothing to say that would make that feel any less like a knife in the gut. The rest of the morning was spent making calls, setting up an appointment with the lawyer Adam had recommended, and figuring out what I needed to do to start separating myself from Sarah legally. Every conversation felt clinical, just another thing to check off a list, another step toward wiping her from my life. Adam left me alone for most of it, giving me space, but when I finally set my phone down and leaned back against the couch, exhausted from just existing, he sat down across from me, cracking open a beer before sliding another one my way. "You talked to her since you left?" he asked, watching me carefully. I scoffed, shaking my head. "She's been blowing up my phone. I'm not interested in whatever bullshit excuse she's trying to sell." Adam took a sip of his beer, setting the bottle down with a dull thud. "You ever think about revenge?" I looked at him, narrowing my eyes slightly. "What?" He shrugged. "She spent 6 months lying to you, treating you like an idiot. You just gonna walk away, or are you gonna make sure she regrets it?" The thought had crossed my mind more than once since last night. There was a part of me that wanted to make her feel just a fraction of the humiliation, the pain, the absolute rage that had been clawing at my insides since I caught her. I wanted her to lose something, to have to watch everything she had built with me crumble around her, the same way I had to watch my life collapse in the span of one night. "I don't know," I admitted, picking at the label on my beer bottle. "What am I supposed to do? Send her boss an email with a nice little summary of her after-hours activities?" Adam smirked slightly. "Not a bad idea. If they have some policy about workplace relationships, she could lose her job." I exhaled, staring at the ceiling, considering it. It was tempting, so goddamn tempting, but part of me knew that losing her job wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't erase the past 6 months. It wouldn't undo the fact that she had looked me in the eyes every single day and lied through her teeth. It wouldn't make me feel whole again. "She's not worth the effort," I muttered finally, shaking my head. "I just want to be done." Adam didn't push, just nodded, sipping his beer. "Fair enough. But if you change your mind, let me know. I'd be happy to help ruin her life." I almost smiled at that, but the truth was, I didn't have it in me to care enough to ruin her. I had spent 9 years loving her, trusting her, believing that we were building something together. It was exhausting to think about using what little energy I had left on her, even if it was just to watch her burn. Instead, I finished my beer, leaned back against the couch, and let myself think about something I hadn't really considered yet: what came next. I had spent so long being Sarah's husband that I had no idea who I was without that title. The thought of starting over, of rebuilding from nothing, should have felt overwhelming. But instead, for the first time since last night, something inside me felt just a little bit lighter. The next morning, I woke up with a clearer head than I'd had in days. There was no confusion, no hesitation, just the simple fact that my life as I had known it was over, and now it was time to deal with the aftermath. Adam had already left for work by the time I got up, leaving a note on the kitchen counter with his lawyer's contact information scribbled at the bottom. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat at the table, and dialed the number, listening to the rings with a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching someone else's life unfold instead of my own. A woman answered, professional and polite, and after a few quick questions, I was transferred to the lawyer, a man named Carter Evans. His voice was calm, direct, and within minutes, we had a meeting set for later that afternoon. He explained the basics, what I needed to bring, what the process would look like, but none of it really stuck. All I cared about was that this was the first real step toward cutting Sarah out of my life completely. After the call ended, I finally checked my phone, scrolling through the unread messages without feeling anything. Sarah had stopped calling sometime in the middle of the night, but the texts were still coming in. "Steve, please talk to me. I don't want things to end like this. I made a mistake. Please, can we just talk? I don't want to lose you." I tossed the phone onto the table and took another sip of my coffee, feeling nothing but exhaustion at the sight of her words. She didn't want to lose me? She had lost me the second she let another man into our life. There was nothing left to say. By the time the meeting with Carter rolled around, I had already started making a list of everything I needed to do: bank accounts to separate, bills to transfer, things in the house that were mine and mine alone. The legal process wasn't going to be quick, but I was ready to get it started. Carter went over the details, explaining how it would play out, what to expect, and what my options were. "She doesn't get a say in this," he told me firmly. "She can contest certain things, but you have more than enough grounds for a clean break. Infidelity makes it easier." "Good," I said, signing the paperwork without hesitation. "I want this done as fast as possible." Carter nodded, gathering the documents. "I'll get this filed right away. Have you spoken to her at all?" "No," I muttered, leaning back in my chair. "And I don't plan to." "Smart," he said simply. "She's going to try to manipulate you. People like her always do. Don't let her." I didn't respond, but I didn't need to. I already knew that whatever Sarah said, whatever she tried, it wouldn't change anything. I left the office feeling lighter, but there was still one last thing I needed to do before I could move forward. As much as I wanted to disappear from Sarah's life entirely, I needed to see her one last time, to say the words that would make it clear this was over, that there was no coming back from what she had done. I drove to the house, pulling into the driveway and sitting there for a moment, gathering myself. The curtains were drawn, but I knew she was inside. I stepped out, walked up to the door, and knocked. It took a few seconds, but then the door opened, and there she was. She looked like she hadn't slept, her eyes red and tired, her face pale. For a brief moment, I felt nothing but disgust, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Steve," she breathed, stepping back slightly. "You came. I didn't waste time. I filed for divorce today." Her face crumpled instantly, tears filling her eyes. "Please, don't do this. I know I hurt you, but I love you. I was stupid. I was weak, but I never stopped loving you." I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. "You don't do what you did to someone you love, Sarah." She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "I wasn't thinking," she pleaded. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just went on for 6 months." I interrupted, my voice sharp. "Don't insult me. You made a choice, over and over again. Now, I'm making mine." Her tears fell freely now, her shoulders shaking. "Please, Steve, just give me a chance to fix this. I'll do anything. Therapy, counseling, whatever you want." I shook my head, my voice steady. "The only thing I want is to never have to see you again after this is done." She covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing, but I didn't feel anything anymore. The love I had for her had died the moment I walked into that bedroom. "I'll have my lawyer send over the paperwork," I said, turning back toward my car. "Don't contact me again unless it's about signing them." She didn't chase after me. She didn't call my name. She just stood there, crying in the doorway, watching me leave. And this time, I didn't look back.